Welcome to the return of 5-question interviews. For longtime followers of myself and Player 4 podcast, you may remember 5-question interviews as a text-only format that I retired when we founded the podcast. Well, it's back, and I've got some exciting stuff planned for the near future. Our first guest is a good friend and longtime supporter of Player 4 podcast, Matthew Anderson. Thanks so much for agreeing to be on the show.
Glad to be here, Joseph.
Matthew Anderson works as a GIS research technician. His hobbies include video games, movies, reading, exercise, theology, philosophy, and natural science. And now it's time to delve deep into the burning question on everyone's minds. Question number 1. As always, let's start with your work as a GIS research technician. What does GIS stand for? And what does your job entail?
For starters, I work at Texas A&M University at Corpus Christi. Specifically, I work at the Hart Research Institute for Gulf of Mexico Studies. And to your first question, GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. Essentially a form of digital map making and using bird spatial and geographic data to use primarily for data sharing and maps. Google Maps, Google Earth is a pretty good example of that. And in the GIS lab, I help out with data entry and cataloging scientific reports into the database and cataloging all the different subjects and data recorded from each report. Usually our data and text we use goes to various agencies, and specifically some of the work I do, especially out in the field, like on the Gulf Coast, especially on border islands and on the Texas coast. We plot shoreline erosion and land change, and the data we monitor goes to various state agencies, including the Texas General Land Office. So it's a pretty good job. Good people working there too. And hoping to go back for my master's in geospatial engineering.
That's a fascinating subject. Have there been any surprising trends that you've noticed when you've been charting erosion?
Oh yes, just that. Specifically South Padre Island and Mustang Island on the Texas Gulf Coast. Barrier Islands typically move inland from coastal erosion, whereas the front face of the beach kind of retreats inland, where sediment is taken away from the beach, but then also deposited toward the back of the island past the dunes. I poured over lots of different reports involving sea level rise and landward retreat of barrier islands.
I would ask you what a day in the life looks like for a GIS research technician, but it seems like it's not so much a day-to-day thing as much as it is a monthly or even yearly process. So maybe briefly you could describe, for those who don't understand what your job entails, where a project begins and ends and what you might be doing?
Well, to be honest, I'm more of a lab assistant. I'm not really a professor. I just more or less help out with some of the basic tasks that they need help with, help maintain equipment, keep a log of reports, data collected from journals, and occasionally go out in the field and help take measurements of beach profiles. We essentially take measurements of the general outline of the barrier island at different locations to get a glimpse of basic shape of the island along a line from the back dunes to where the water line is. And we essentially take measurements bi-yearly to note for any kind of changes in the beach and the dune morphology.
So about how long would that process take? Let's say they're let's go measure this island and see what the changes are. How long would that take? Is that a day thing? Is it just a few hours? Is it a few weeks of just traveling back and forth?
More as we plot out certain spots in which we measure the transect of the dunes itself. If you look at the map and drew a line from the back dune all the way to where the beach is, we essentially follow that line at that spot and make note of elevation and any kind of notable features, vegetation, whether or not there's any kind of construction going on, if the beach is being maintained through artificial means, whether the beach is essentially being scraped to make way for vacation traffic, and whether or not that aids in the erosion of the beach, and send the data to various agencies, and they plot out what plans and changes need to be made.
Okay, so it is a gradual process. All right, so let's move on to question number 2. You have listed yourself as an avid reader. So what books have you recently purchased or perhaps rediscovered that you would highly recommend?
Right now, I'm kind of reading through the Halo Fractures, the recent Halo anthology book. They're kind of slowly going through there. Some stories good, some are it's all right. Been meaning to read Star Wars Thrawn, the new book from Matthew Zahn. I'll be honest, I'm kind of familiar with Thrawn. I know he's a big fan favorite for the expanded universe, but I guess I haven't personally had much experience reading his material, and I haven't even watched Rebels, so I still have a lot of homework in that regard.
Right.
I'm hoping that once I get around to reading this Thrawn book, it'll be a good primer, with the new canon as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited to keep him in the Star Wars canon. Okay, let's move on to question number 3. You mentioned theology and philosophy, so let's talk about that. Who would you say has been your biggest influence in these areas? C.S. Lewis, Wittgenstein, St. Augustine, classical Greeks, Paul of Tarsus?
Oh, yes, all that. Just about everyone that you just listed. I'd also add Thomas Aquinas, mentioned Augustine and Lewis, also St. Teresa of Avila, and a big fan of John Henry Newman. Also, Peter Kraft.
All those are great names. Okay, so question number 4. Let's travel back in time. You and I, along with many of our friends online, first met through the Rooster Teeth website. When did you first sign up for your account, and why?
Let's see, back in 2013. I'd always been kind of an on-off fan of, Red versus Blue. And that was until, 2013 that someone told me to look up the RT podcasts, which I hadn't really listened to before. And that was around that time I decided to get more involved with RT content and just decided to set up an account and become a sponsor as well. And it was just a pure dumb chance that we were able to find each other on there as well. Back when you asked if anyone from the community was going to be in Corpus for the weekend and wanted to meet up because you were taking your family there for vacation. And I jumped at that opportunity.
Yeah, I remember you and I, we knew of each other, and I knew your username, but I didn't know anything about you. Just like with Tristan, before I reached out and became his friend, I didn't know much about him or Alex or anyone. And you were like, yeah, I live in Corpus, so let's meet up. And my wife was like, is this cool? Is this going to be a good thing? And I was like, yeah, it's a Rooster Teeth guy. I don't have any question that we're going to get along just fine. So, final question, number 5. You are somewhat of an avid con-goer. You've even showcased a few cosplays. What conventions do you typically attend throughout the year?
Typically, I always go to RTX, of course. Also recently started making PAX South a regular destination as well, because San Antonio is kind of an easy drive. Always like going to downtown San Antonio anyway, so it was a good match. But also I like going to local cons here in Corpus Christi, especially RealmsCon comes on every year. And in fact, just this year, Corpus Christi Comic Con just had its inaugural year as well. And I'm hoping to see that grow as well.
Yeah, I do remember seeing something about you attending that for its inaugural year. That's pretty exciting to have your own Comic Con.
Oh, yes. Have a small setup, just a 2-day weekend, small convention center as well. But even then, everything ran pretty smoothly.
What cosplays have you shown off recently?
Typically go around as Dark Link, but I guess in the past I've also been, Dallas from Payday, also Jacket from Hotline Miami. Those were probably just easy starter cosplays, which worked out pretty well, but then I kind of graduated up to getting a Dark Link outfit together, and people still really like that too. In the future, I'm hoping to put together an Imperial Staff Officer outfit, and looking to join the 501st Legion.
Oh yes, the 501st, that's exciting news.
I know a lot of good friends who are in the 501st, and I see them a lot at other conventions. I also really like Star Wars a lot, so I figured I want to help them out and join their ranks, and also be a cool Star Wars character that everyone kind of likes as well. Though Staff Officer is kind of a good entry outfit anyway. Plus, with the new movies coming out, the 501st has pretty much had a boon, with people wanting to see other characters in Star Wars outfits, as well as with, new characters coming out that people want to see in cosplay. And they also do a lot of great work with Make-A-Wish, which I like to see and want to help out as well.
Well, I look forward to hearing more news on that. That is it for this interview. Thank you so much for joining us on the first ever audio podcast version of 5-Question Interviews.
Thank you very much.
Also, everyone tune in. The archive of the live stream from this past Wednesday, which was the day that we recorded this interview, will be coming out in a few days, and Matthew is a guest on that. This is Joseph Dunlap signing out. Matthew, you get the final goodbye.
Good night, everyone. Love you.
You can find Matthew Anderson on Twitter at Matt317A.